All right, balancers. Today's guest is someone I'm really excited to have on the show because, you know, when you just come across those profiles on Instagram and you're just magnetically drawn to someone, and I'm talking like from the point of view where I feel like we almost have similar neural pathways in our brain. We think about things in a very similar way. So I think this is going to be a very synergistic, easy conversation. So I'm really excited to have you on today. Our guest is the CEO of Speaker by Nimi Mehta. She's a TV and radio presenter, an MC, a podcast host, a speaker, a public speaking mentor. What don't you do? It's the beautiful Nimi Mehta on the podcast today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to synergize with you.
Oh, I love it.
I know.
No, there's gonna be a lot of synergizing. I think one of the first things that I was really interested in was your journey from, and I think this is something a lot of people resonate with, that feeling of completing your degree. So you studied journalism and getting your first job, which you have described as being your dream job at the time, and just that first year experience and what happened directly after, because I think that's important context to understand kind of where you've come to now.
Yeah, that's a great first question. So, I mean, just to set the scene, I guess, for people, did journalism at university, came straight out at the age of 21 and got the job to be an MTV presenter. And that for me just felt so normal at the time. When something like that happens to you, you think that life is that easy, especially at such a young age. You know, you come out thinking, wow, it's really going to be dog eat dog. And then this happens and it was amazing.
So you just applied and got the job?
Just applied. It was like an online competition. You had to submit a video reel. And so I booked out my local church's hall. And I grabbed all my family and friends and I said, I need you to be extras. And we were in the dressing room and I was walking through pretending it's Fashion Week. And I had like my sister getting her hair done by her friend and, you know, people throwing clothes around.
I love the effort.
It's still on YouTube to this day just because it's so iconic for me. I'm like, I really produced, directed and presented in that.
That's amazing.
And so that is what got me the gig. But it was just what followed after, you know, and I think that we all have these dreams and these goalposts, so to say. And I really thought at that age that you have one goalpost, you get to that goalpost, and then it's over.
Life's done.
Life's done. Like signed, sealed, delivered. Like it's over in a really good way. That I'm just going to be plain sailing after this. Obviously it wasn't. And it was a real hit to the ego. It was a real hit to, you know, my mindset of like, oh, what now? You know, where do I go now? And I just wasn't prepared for what was after. And so I think that's when I realized, and it really hit me, that my dreams are ever evolving and ever changing. And sometimes when you think something is your dream, it's not. It's just a stepping stone towards the bigger picture.
Yeah, there's always a bigger piece at play. I think we've forgotten one key detail though. So you got the job at MTV and then what happened?
Yeah.
That shattered your ego.
Yeah. Well, I was there for a year and I had a contract for the year, and then the contract ended and I was unemployed for a few years after that, trying to hustle back in to be a presenter. So
they just didn't renew it.
Yeah, they didn't renew it. The channel that they basically created was something called like District MTV. So they were trying a new concept of music and fashion together. And it just wasn't picking up. So they ended it all, and that was me. That was me done.
Well, you know what's really interesting? What a beautiful lesson to learn at such a young age, that your dreams are ever evolving and that goals are not, I like talking about it in the frame of goals are not end posts, they're goal posts. No, what do I can't remember even how I talk about it now, but it's kind of like they're just markers along your journey. Say you're running a marathon, right? It's not the finish line. It's just like, oh, you've reached this part of the process. And the reason I think this is so important to really embrace is because it helps you enjoy the process, which is something I really struggle with, that patience piece when not much is happening or things are happening but they're happening in a different way to what you think. You actually zoom out and you remember you're just in that middle part of between those checkpoints. And when you really zoom out all the way, you realize that's actually what life is. It's not about, you know, I had a similar experience where I thought that achieving this goal, getting this job, or you know, reaching this point was going to feel a certain way. And it felt great, but then it was over and it was like, okay, now what's the next part of life? So I think it's good to have had that reframe at such a young age where you're like, okay, my goals are actually just markers of what's next.
Yeah. Right? And the thing is, no one teaches us this.
You know, life does.
Yeah, life does. And these experiences teach you. And obviously we're in a wonderful position now where we can look back and in hindsight be like, oh, thank God, it really taught me a lot. For some people, I know it can go the other way. I just think that, you know, as we take on these experiences, I think we need to know that we are never, ever the finished product. And I think that's what I was always chasing as a young individual who wanted to be a TV presenter. I want to be Jamila Jamil, or I want to be Davina McCall on the TV. And that was what I had my eyes set on. And I was like, they had their own journey. I didn't recognize that at the time. I thought, oh, overnight they were successes. But I think that it just built my character a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were saying you were unemployed for a few years, and then what was the next thing, and how did you work out how to get to that place after kind of being a little disappointed in that initial dream?
Yeah, I really believe in the power of proximity. So for me, even though I was let go at MTV, they under this group called Viacom, and within Viacom they have like brands like Nickelodeon and stuff like that. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and get a job at any of these companies as long as I'm in the building. As long as I'm in the building, someone will remember me, or I will hear whispers of like a new job opening up, you know. And so I thought, as long as I'm there, I'll be their next choice. And so I applied for a job at Nickelodeon, which was an advert scheduler, just sitting all day, just scheduling adverts. It was so monotonous, but I just thought, I'm there. And nothing came of it. I would love to sit here and tell you like, oh my God, yeah, and then something happened. It didn't. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I never lost sight. I never gave up hope. And so then for me, it was also the process of elimination. I sat with myself and I was like, okay, you want to become a TV presenter? Cool. What about everything else within the media industry? Let's learn every single role possible. Let's experience it. And then let's actually find out if you do want to be a TV presenter, because you might get behind the camera and think, wow, I actually love being a producer or a director. Okay, that now my goals changed to that. And, you know, I tried everything from editorial, my local newspaper, to Hello Magazine, to an internship with ITV, you know, behind one of the biggest breakfast shows in the country. I was hustling. I was so persistent with every work experience job. I mean, I got an email, and back then, you know, there was no such thing as, you know, just clicking a button and being connected to someone on LinkedIn, or, you know, following them on Instagram and DMing them. It was literally showing up at the door. So even if you sent an email, there was no recognition of it. I was showing up the door with physical paper CVs. Yeah, for anyone young listening, we really did do that. And I would show up doing that. And I remember I got one of my internships because a guy who was a producer at a local TV show just wasn't responding to me on my emails, and I just kept going. Like, I was like, once a month, I had set like dates on
Reminders,
my calendar
yeah,
to keep sending him an email like, hey, just to let you know, I'm here, and if anything comes up, let me know. Like, I wasn't pushy at all. But 1 month came up and he goes, you are so persistent, like you will not give up, but lucky for you, something's just come up. And this was like 6 to 8 months after I'd first connected with him. And so my point being that if you set your eyes on something, just keep going. Like, the worst that can happen is they say no. Okay, well, you can't miss something you never had. But if you keep going, something might come out of it. So it was me trying absolutely everything under the sun until I realized, you know what, TV presenting is what I want to do. And I went into radio then, because there was such a lack of opportunity in TV in the UK. And so I wanted to expand my skill set, went into radio at a local radio station, and did that for like 5 months. I was shockingly bad. It was hideous. Honestly, I'm going to play you a clip from it. But it was just like my voice was different. You could tell I'm like super rushed and super anxious, and I didn't really know what I was doing. It was going out to like 1,000 people in my local town. And then 5 months later, I moved to Radio 1 Abu Dhabi to host a national breakfast show. So that was a crazy journey for me, from going from like 1,000 people to a whole nation.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And you actually never know. Like I always say, every networking thing you do, every job, every relationship, like I feel like we get so stuck in like, oh, that was such a waste of time. But honestly, every little thing has its role and leads you to exactly where you're meant to be, right? So even if that 5-month radio job was like, oh, whatever, it served me nothing, maybe you wouldn't have gotten attention for the Abu Dhabi role if you hadn't had that on your resume. So you just never know how all these things kind of play together. Before I ask you the next question, I'll just share one thing that really helped me continue to be persistent, because it's the same thing with, you know, if you're trying to get certain people on the podcast or you're trying to pitch yourself for certain things, you're going to get a lot of rejection. Like, don't sit here thinking just because you see XYZ person on the show, I don't experience rejection. Like, it happens to everyone. And for anyone to get anywhere, you have to go through the hurdles of rejection. That's life. But a really beautiful reframe from me was, imagine you knew you had 50 no's before you got a yes. You'd be going as fast as you could to get through and churn through all those no's just so you could hurry up and get to the yes. So seeing every rejection or setback as just, that's one less one before my yes or before my opportunity, has been like a really great reframe for me to just keep going, right? And not take it personally, because half the time it's not personal at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you've gone into this Abu Dhabi role and now you're kind of in this entrepreneurial, freelancing, doing a bit of everything. So this transition into being, I guess, career focused to entrepreneurial, if I can call it that, focus. What have been the biggest things you've learned in that transition?
Yeah, wow. So I did radio on Abu Dhabi for a year until Channel 4 poached me over to Dubai. So then I was at Channel 4 hosting the breakfast show for 5 years. And that was a grind. That was like 4 a.m. wake ups. It was a lifestyle choice. It really was. Doing a show from 6 to 10. I did that solidly for 5 years. We were named the #1 show in the country, you know, and I absolutely loved it and adored it. And you know, those years I was unemployed that I was telling you back in the UK, the power of visualization and manifestation is real. Like, I know
Talk to me about it.
We hear it and we see it and we consume so much stuff that just sounds so fuzzy. That's like, yeah, visualization, manifestation. I cannot stress it enough. It is one of the key things that got me to where I am today.
I agree.
So I remember sitting there in my bed whilst I was crying because I was unemployed and miserable.
Tissues in tow.
Yeah, exactly. And I came to Dubai on and off growing up anyway. And I was like, you know what, let's just see what's out there. And I was on channel4dubai.com and I saw like the presenter lineup and all these faces. And I remember, like, I kid you not, Erica, I was sitting there for like an hour just staring at that lineup, staring and just visualizing myself in that lineup. And I kept saying, you're going to be there. You're going to be there. You're going to be there. And I mean, it didn't happen overnight. I would love to say that, but it happened literally a few years later, where I was then hosting the breakfast show of that lineup. And so this kind of power of believing really changed the game for me. But that was a solid job. That was my dream job that I've been working all these years to be, you know, at the top of the game. You know, for me as well, a female in radio, females were generally considered kind of like giggle girls in radio. The guy was the main guy and the girl would just kind of laugh at whatever the guy says. That is just a classic radio setup. I was really lucky because my co-host and me had a 50-50 share. You know, we were very much like equal voices. But I loved the show. And it just got to a point where I was like, it is time for a change. And you feel it. You feel it in your bones. Like, you know it. And so I know, and from my community, I have a lot of people who talk to me about, how did you take the leap? Like, how did you make that change? How did you believe in yourself? And it came down to one thing, and that was, which fear do I choose? So there were 2 fears. The first was, oh my gosh, but if I leave, I have a solid salary here. So financially I was covered. It was my comfort zone. I knew it day in, day out. I had a routine with it. The third was, you know, this was your dream. Are you going to let go of your dream? I was holding on to that fear of, but the unknown, what's going to happen next? And then that was one side of the fear. The second side of the fear was, okay, but are you still going to be here in 5 years' time? Are you still going to feel undervalued in 5 years' time? Are you still going to be saying to yourself, oh, Nimi, why are you here? Are you still going to be getting out of bed every morning feeling like it's more of a chore than a spring in your step? And that fear outweighed the fear before. I was so scared of staying stagnant that any fear I felt about leaving and taking the leap was just irrelevant to me. Because I was like, I would rather look back and say, I'm so proud you tried, than, oh, I'm so proud you stayed in your little comfort box and, you know, shied away from your potential.
Yeah.
So if anyone is feeling like they're in that kind of period and scared to kind of take the next step, I would say weigh out your fear. Which one scares you more? Because for me, it was definitely the latter.
That is such a powerful question. And in a very similar vein, a question you could also ask is, which discomfort do you want to choose? It's a very similar question because the reality is it's uncomfortable not pursuing things that you dream about or things that you wish you wanted to do. And it's also uncomfortable pursuing them because you're, you know, dealing with potentially not feeling like you're worthy to do it and self-doubt and the uncertainty and all of that. But then the flip of that is actually just not doing it at all, never trying, never knowing, and being stuck in something that maybe is not setting your heart on fire. So yeah, I think just being really honest with yourself, like I feel like this is one of those things where if you get that feeling like you described it in your bones, I know that feeling. It's happened, you know, iconic moments in my life where in that moment you have I think it's like twofold. You have that feeling and you acknowledge what's going on, and then it's the action piece. Yeah. And that's obviously the hardest part. But getting raw with yourself, I think, is the most actionable thing you can do because it helps you see what you're like at a fork in a road, right? And it's like, okay, which one do I want to go for? So I think that's really good advice for anybody listening. And really you can apply that to any juncture or crossroad in your life with anything, relationships, decisions with your health, like, you know what I mean? Like pick your fear or pick your discomfort.
100%. And I would say that your body tells you exactly what you want. And this is something that I've kind of learned to listen to. We talk about listening to our mind and our heart all the time, but our body is so aligned with us in the sense that if I feel something in my bones, that term exists for a reason, right? Because you feel it in your core, in your gut. I have a 5-second rule where I'm like, okay, as soon as I feel something, I hold on to that because in 5 seconds, my mind's going to start convincing me of otherwise. My mind's going to start convincing me, no, don't leave because what about money? What about this? What about stability? What about, you know, but you want to be able to afford, you know, a house next year. How are you going to be able to do that? You know, all these little elements of life that come through, the extras that really don't contribute to your core, your mind convinces you otherwise of what your body tells you. So I set a 5-second rule. As soon as I have thought and felt something, I instantly am aware that my mind's going to kick in any second and I need to like hold that piece. I need to hold that core gut feeling I'm getting. I need to hold on to that. And I would say that a lot of us avoid it. A lot of us ignore it because it's probably the easiest thing to do. And so that kind of discipline has really changed the game for me in decision making and taking these kind of leaps.
Yeah, that's amazing. And often I think the brain is the rational part of the body. We owe a lot to it for keeping us alive, but it does try and give meaning to everything when sometimes it stands on its own enough as it is. And I think the reason that is so good, like I love that, just sitting with the thought for 5 seconds and just noticing what that knee-jerk reaction is, because that often is a little bit uncomfortable because it's prompting change, right? But if you actually just, that's a really good actionable thing people can take and maybe practice. That's a good way to start listening to that inner voice that, you know, when we talk about following your intuition or being more intuitive, I think it comes down to small things like this. My fiance, he used to be a chiropractor and I mean, he's had a huge career shift, which is totally random. But in his times being a chiropractor, we used to talk about how the body's language was pain. And I find this really interesting, just in kind of like a tangent of what we're talking about, is it will also send you signals when things are not right, as equally as when you need to make change or do something different. And so what I find really interesting, I don't know if anyone or yourself can resonate with this, but if I'm really stressed or I'm really out of alignment, I will always get the same pain and it's in my neck. It's always just neck pain. And I always used to think, oh, I'm on the computer too much. But I remember it happening one time when I was on holidays. I got, something happened and I got a bit stressful and I was like, well, I haven't been on my computer. So I now notice that as like my body's language. But I think just tuning into little things, whether it is in moments of stress, in moments of change, whether it's a knee-jerk reaction before your mind kicks in, like just getting familiar with how you respond to things and what that looks like in your body is so powerful to take control of your own life. So
yeah, and that also applies, you know, I've like deeply studied this even when it comes to like communication. But that also applies to like when you meet people. I don't know about you. I don't know if you've ever met like in a social situation, you bumped into new people, you've met them. My body instantly tells me if I am...
the vibe.
Yeah. You can feel the energy. Yep. Am I for that person or am I not? Yep. And usually even when my body tells me they're not my vibe, I still then convince myself, no, it's okay. Like, I start doubting myself rather than doubting the other person. And we need to trust ourselves more. That's what it comes down to. And I think that this is when we start to get into, you know, bad friendships or bad relationships because we are not following our gut. And that we need to be able to pick up these signs, and that level of self-awareness is really key, I think.
Yeah. And I think one thing that helped me get comfortable with that, because I was a bit like, but they're not a bad person. I was overcomplicating it. I was like, it's not even about good or bad or that they've done something wrong. It's just alignment.
Yes.
Like at the end of the day, like our energies are just not aligned, and that doesn't mean I need to not like you, or it doesn't mean you have to have done something wrong to me. We're just not aligned.
Yeah.
And I just don't need to give you more than what I have to.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
And that's okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
So fine. I'd love to ask you a bit about finding your voice. Like obviously through speaker and different things that you're doing now, that's something you're helping other people achieve. And I think it's such a powerful thing. I mean, as a podcast host, I know the power of my voice in learning, in communicating, in understanding different things, and I think connecting is another big one too. So when it comes to finding your voice, what does that actually mean? Because I think there may be a lot of people listening who've not even considered what is my voice? Like what does, even now that I'm thinking about it, like, okay, it's the physical thing, like it's my voice, but what does that mean in terms of how I portray myself to the world, and how do people go about locating what that even is for them?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, the reason that all kind of started was when I was shifting from my main job, which was being on the radio, to then what next. And I had a like kind of mind shift of perspective. So I went from the day to day, okay, this is ticking over, month to month, this is ticking over, to then legacy mode. I went to mode of, what am I leaving behind? What am I sharing with people around me that I have learned from my journey that they can, you know, that can help them along theirs? And that's when I started to think about how I used to be an absolute mute as a child, and now I'm hosting some of the biggest events and TV shows in the country. I
wouldn't believe that for a second.
Right? And my mum and grandma still to this day are like, are you the same person? Like they just cannot, it doesn't click for them. But that really resonated with me. And so what I did was I sat down and I was like, okay, so how did you get from A to Z? How did you do it? And I realized what I have taught myself, I could framework, and I could help people to actually learn that framework and do it in less time than I can. So it was that shift to legacy mode of what do I actually want to leave behind, and that kind of like zooming out and bigger picture of like this is so much bigger than you.
What's your purpose? Like what's your impact?
100%. And so then, you know, I looked at, okay, I found my voice. And I kept asking myself the question, what does that mean though, Nimi? What does that mean? And so it was identifying what was truly me. And I created something called the voice layer theory after doing all of my kind of like looking back and, you know, how can I build this and how can I teach this to other people? And the easiest way to describe it is that when you're born in your most, you know, developing early years, the biggest influence on your voice from the get-go, your parents, right? Your mum or your dad or your guardians, whoever is raising you. And on top of that, then say you've got your voice here, you've got the parents on top. Then on top of that, we go to school. We've got teachers, we've got other students. On top of that, we're consuming media, TV, radio. On top of that, now in a world of social media, where millions of voices are influencing us, telling us what we should feel, what we should think, what our opinions should be on certain things. And what I realized is we're there at the bottom, we're the foundation, but all these layers are building up on top of us. And what's happening is our own voice is getting diluted. So I don't know about you, but like in any situation, even with my partner, I say something and I'm like, that wasn't me, that was my mum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a big one. He's actually been good calling me out, being like,
Yeah.
that was your mum.
Yeah. And I'm so glad he does, because sometimes we do need that. You know, when I'm with a friend and she's like, what do you want to have for dinner? And I'm like, oh, sushi. And she's like, oh, yes, let's go for sushi. And I'm like, Nimi, did you want sushi, or did you just know that she loves sushi, so you're going for sushi?
You're like, damn, should have picked the ramen.
Right. Obsessed with ramen, by the way. Obsessed. So it was all of these things of, we got so many people influencing our voice. And what we don't do, and what we've never been taught from a young age, is that our voice is its own nucleus. We kind of just think it's a default and a given, but your voice is your greatest asset. It is one of the core things that help you to communicate who you are to the world. How can we haven't done the groundwork in identifying what that voice is? So there's a way to kind of identify that and break all those layers down. And it takes a lot of time. I'd love to sit here and say, okay, you can do it overnight.
Right,
yeah. But it took me a lot of time. And what I did was first was isolate my voice. So that was taking myself away for like a week or so. When I say taking myself away, I wish it was going to like some private island. No, it was just not consuming social media.
Detox.
It was exactly that. Detox. And then also just not talking to a lot of people for a week, which is amazing, by the way. And we all need to do it. We need to just sit with ourselves for a while. And I started questioning everything. Question everything. If you walk away with anything, if you're listening right now and you walk away with anything today, is just question every decision you make, every thought you have, every opinion and feeling you have. Why do I feel that way? How come? How come that's what you chose? I started even questioning like the tiniest things, from what do I want to have for dinner? Okay, why are you choosing that? Why, Nimi? And it can get really tedious, but the point is that that's the only way to break through, because then you start realizing why you start making these choices. Is it you, or is it someone else highly influencing it?
What's the source?
What's the source? And I got to the point where I was like, journalism. I started questioning my whole career and my purpose. And I was like, did I do it because my mum wanted me to do it, or did I want to do it? And you have a bit of an identity crisis through it all. But that just means it's working.
Yeah.
It's really working. So I isolated my voice completely. And then what I started doing was evaluating the voices around me. So the 5 closest people to me, they say you are the average of the 5 closest people to you. Okay, who are they then? Let's actually identify them, and let's actually recognize if they're a positive influence on my voice, if they are guiding my voice, enhancing my voice. Are they helping it in any way, or are they dimming my voice? And so that's what made me really identify the people. And then for me, it was just elimination, and I had to be pretty cutthroat, because I'm like, this is me. This is my nucleus. I have to protect my voice at all costs. And I don't think we think of it that way.
No.
And when I interviewed Gary Vee, I asked him about that. And I said, so how did you find your voice? And, how would you share with other people that they can find their voice? And he said, I found my voice in the trenches of other voices. And he said that my mum was such a positive influence on my voice. And I just realized that other people's voices don't matter so much to me, and he completely isolated his voice away from everyone else to identify what it is. And that to me was just like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. They say never take advice from people who haven't already done it. He's done it. Yeah. Right. And so those 2 things for me was isolating my voice, and then evaluating all the voices around me, and then rebuilding the voices around you. Okay, so who does make you feel good? Who does enhance your voice? And then that started to beef out the skeleton a bit of what it is that's truly me. And I think that that's what finding your voice is. And by the way, it's an ever evolving journey. It is. I can't sit here and say to you, yeah, I found it. I've mastered it 100%. No. It changes every single day. And sometimes other voices outgrow you too. We talk about friends outgrowing, and like you just meet each other at a certain path, and then you kind of amicably go your different ways. But that's how I feel about certain voices as well. And I just wish people saw our voices as external beings, and not just a default within us.
I think this is so, so powerful, and a really interesting thing for people to do. And when you were kind of talking about the isolation piece, I was thinking in my head, this is going to be quite difficult, because you're in the world we live in, like no one lives in their own lane without any external stimulation. So I love that there's that second piece of actually critically analyzing, like, who are those 5 people?
Yeah.
You could even take it a step further and be like, what content am I consuming? Who am I following online? Because
100%.
I feel like even if you are not with somebody all the time, if that is someone you're listening to constantly, like, what are the things they're saying? Are they aligned for you? And this just, to me, is like screaming, like it's like ultimate alignment.
Yeah.
Because when you can work out, this is like such an amazing blueprint for anything in life. Like to really like get down to why you have certain beliefs about yourself, why you make certain decisions, why you know, for people who struggle to set boundaries, who feel guilty for doing things or not doing things, who doubt their own potential, like these are all things I've struggled with, and I can just see the value in when you peel that away and you're like, what is the source? Where is the truth in my voice in this, and where have I layered on top of what other people think?
Yeah.
It's such a powerful way to work out what's going on. I just want to share one experience I had last year that's actually really resonating with what you just shared. And I went to Greece for my sister's wedding last year in August, and I don't really drink that much alcohol. But in the last few years since moving here particularly, it's been less and less and less. I mean, it's a big part of the culture in Australia.
Yeah.
It's not something I do heaps. I enjoy a drink when I'm out, but again, not something I do regularly. And when I went to Greece last year, just before that, I'd been doing a lot of work on myself, spending a lot more time by myself. I call myself a retired extrovert. I was that
Nice.
person that I used to hate being in my own company.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
always be like, I'd have like 100 coffee acquaintances. Like
Yeah.
I was that person.
Yeah.
And since moving here, I've really embraced the value of being alone, hearing myself, creating that space. So anyway, I went to Greece for my sister's wedding, and it was a very social, beautiful, fun time, catching up with family. Obviously none live here, so it was
Yeah.
a really nice time. And, you know, you're in Greece, it's summer, you're having spritzes every day, that kind of
Yeah.
experience. When I got back, I had a rude shock because I realized how detached I was from myself. It was like I couldn't, not this dramatic, but like take it metaphorically, like I couldn't feel my body cues. My intuition was nowhere to be found. And ever since that experience, every time I have had alcohol, I feel like I'm very hyper aware as to the thoughts I have when I start to feel a bit tipsy, how that changes, how that voice changes. So, you know, I just wanted to bring it up because I feel like even things you do or places that you immerse yourself in can impact that voice if it's not as direct as like somebody else's voice. And alcohol for me has been something I'm now like super attuned to as something that disconnects me from my own voice.
Yeah.
So that was just a really weird experience I had. I don't know if you
Yeah.
drink at all, if you've had a similar experience.
Yeah,
but
no. When you were speaking about that, what made me kind of resonate with that is every time I go home and I'm surrounded by people that make me disconnect with myself. Because, you know, living away from home for so long, when you go back to the place that you grew up, a lot of people here in the UAE can probably resonate, is that then you surround yourself with the people who know the old you.
yeah,
And so
you regress almost.
you literally go back to that little girl. And I feel like every single time I go home, I go back to that little girl and I'm again that insecure, timid, mute. And then I come back to Dubai and I have to almost relearn myself.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's such a weird experience.
Reintroduce myself. And so that goes for drinking, that goes for people, and that just tells you the things that you should not be consuming. That's across the board. And so I think that that level of awareness for you to come home and like recognize that is huge.
Yeah. I had a guest on once and she was talking about how when you go and visit family and you've been away for so long and you've created your own life, there's this like anxiety or fear or actual reality of regressing back into. She was talking about it in the context of a family dynamic, but you have a role to play in your family. And that was growing up, right? You might have been the person that lashed out. You might have been the person that copped all the comments from someone. You might have been the adjudicator. Like everyone has a role in a family. And when you're in that dynamic, you almost regress back into that role, even if you've done a lot of work to kind of evolve and grow out of it.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. I think like some of these things you know, I'm always going to go home and visit my family. I'm not at the stage where I've like cut out alcohol for life, but it's just having this awareness. So now when I am doing these things, I'm a lot more intentional because I know the impact it has on my voice and my intuition, my connection with self. So I just wanted to bring that up because it really like reminded me of what you were just sharing. And I think the framework you've shared is really, really valuable, just like to anything, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I asked you the other day before you came on the podcast today. I asked you if there was anything you'd been ruminating on, thinking about, because I'm the kind of person where you might hear me talking about a lot of things on the show. People will hear like similar themes coming up, but I'm the kind of person that like ponders on a lot of things like 24/7.
Yeah.
I'm like a ruminator.
Yeah.
So I asked you if there was anything you'd been thinking about or like just talking about generally. And there were a few things that really stood out to me from what you shared. The first one is this difference between being nice and being assertive. And this is something I've struggled with as someone who I think grew up as a people pleaser, trying not to ruffle any feathers, trying not to come across as rude, right? Always be the nice person, always be the bigger person. But that's meant I haven't been assertive in moments where I should have probably stood up for myself.
Yeah.
So how have you been thinking about this juncture with being nice and being assertive? And is there like a happy medium?
Yeah. I think, I had to completely dissolve the idea that I had that it's either being nice or being mean. And I thought those are my only two options. And especially as a woman, I feel that for us, we do have different approaches, especially now as an entrepreneur. I'm speaking purely as an entrepreneur, that being in the room and, having conversations that, are up to the progress of your company. And, you're talking about bigger things that are bigger than you, that I felt just really uncomfortable with that. I'm kind of like you. I was like a people pleaser. I was just, I just want to be nice. That's the only way I know how to operate, is to just be kind. My dad, when we were growing up, my mom and dad always just said like, I don't even care what religion you are, just be a good person. Just be a good person. And that's just how me and my sister have been raised. So then specifically in the media industry, I really struggled with it because I'll share a story with you. I had a hairdresser at the TV studio, and he's left now. And on his last day, he took me to the side and he was like, I absolutely love you, but I have to share something with you. I have to tell you something. If there's one thing that I leave with you, this is it. I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. And he goes, you need to stop being so nice. You just need to stop. And I was like, what? I thought he was joking. And he said, yeah, you need to be a bit of a bitch around here to be respected. And I just sat with that for a while because I was like, well, hang on a second. That's not the way I operate. It would be really alien for me to try to be that, to be respected. Because, there are people in the world, in the industry, who do navigate themselves in that way. And I sat with myself and I was like, yes, 100%. They probably get their stuff done for them in a better manner, in a quicker, more efficient manner, because the people that are doing it for them operate from fear, not from love for them. It's from absolute fear.
Yeah, that's not respect at the end of the day.
It's not respect. And that's not what I want whatsoever. And I went to a friend of mine who's in the industry in the US, and I was like, he's told me this, what do you think? Because at the same time I was experiencing a lot of disrespect, a lot of undervaluing. And I thought in that moment, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to be this. I'm going to be like that hard nut. Obviously, it was just like in the spur of the moment and I had the adrenaline rushing. It just wasn't true to me. But I think that what I have figured out and what I'm still learning to this day is the difference between being kind and assertive. I think that you can still be kind with it, but still be very clear and concise about what it is that you want. And I think that I got muddled with that. I thought, as the talent that, I don't want anyone to think I'm difficult. I don't want anyone to think I'm a diva. As women, we get labeled so easily. Diva, bitch, difficult is what we get. If a man does it, it's, wow, like he's got something about him. He's powerful. He's strong. Whereas we get labeled completely something different. And so that kind of balance I've literally been trying to just weave into my everyday interactions. And that has been stopping myself. I've literally been stopping myself from just being the yes person and stripping it back. And that's a quality of a highly confident person, is the ability to respond and not react. So responding means taking your time. It means not waffling. It means understanding and treating your words like gold, that you don't need to say a lot. You just need to keep it concise, keep it tight, and get your message across in the right way. And as a woman, I just feel like I have been learning to, and I've been burnt along the way. I mean, I'm sure you can share some stories, but I have really learnt the hard way of being too nice, because people also walk all over you.
Yeah, they take advantage.
They treat you terribly because they're like, oh, she'll be fine.
Yeah.
Oh, Nimi won't mind.
She'll say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she never minds.
That happens all the time. And so I'm just learning now that, you know what, Nim, there's a way to be kind and super nice with it and respectful, but you just need to be very clear about what you want, and then you'll get the outcome you want as well.
Yeah, I think it comes down to me what you said at the very beginning, which is being assertive, or sorry, what did you say? You said being kind and being mean aren't the two options, right? And being assertive doesn't mean you're being mean.
Yeah.
It actually, for me, it comes down as well to like communicating your boundaries, right? And I think if we even go back to what we were talking about before, if you strip down and come to source, it's like, well, why do I feel the need to put this person's comfort or desires above my own? Because that's what people pleasing is. It's saying yes to someone else and saying no to yourself. And when I had that realization, I was like, this is ridiculous. I would never expect somebody else to say no to themselves and yes to me just to make me feel better. Like, it's their life. Like, if they said no to me, it actually doesn't really change that much about my life. I think we conjure up this story so many times of like how much impact we're having on other people when we say no, but it's like, honey, you're the character of your own story only. Like everyone else is just going to get on with their lives. Like they don't care about you as much as what you think they do, which is the harsh truth, like something I had to realize as well. But yeah, it's I've had a lot of scenarios where in the last few years, the more aligned I'm feeling, I'm able to not defend myself, but I think just be assertive in what I want and what I will not tolerate. I think I've had more experiences in that realm where if I had responded in the moment, if I had not taken my time, it could have been emotional, reactive, but taking your time and just responding in a way that feels aligned for you. I have a specific scenario in mind, which I won't go in detail about, but it was a bit of like an explosive interaction with somebody via text. And, you know, people are saying reply like this and say these angry things and use like, you know, swearing and emotion. And that's just not me. My tolerance for anger, like it's not an emotion I really express. Like I've got an Italian family, which may be very surprising that I don't carry that trait. But my sisters, you know, they're very loud and they like yelling and that's just how they express themselves. But that is not true to me. And so when I've been in those moments where I've had all the emotions sitting behind it, but I don't outwardly respond that way. And it's almost expected. I just take my time with it. That feels more aligned for me. But in the same vein, sometimes that means I just don't say anything at all. And that's me being too nice because I don't want to, you know, kick the can further down the road or continue the explosive kind of interaction. So I think it's an interesting one to think about, like at what point do you assert yourself in a way that's aligned for you? And I think it just comes down to delivery. Right? Because
absolutely. And I think that it goes back to our previous point when we talk about finding your voice. It's that, am I reacting or responding? It's like having that check-in with yourself, you know, and questioning yourself. Was that a reaction or was that an actual response? And, you know, even in professional settings, sometimes even in social settings, we feel so pressured to like give an answer
on the spot
or respond straight away, and just take a beat. Just take a beat, take a breath. And then, you know what, even if you don't know the answer, you know what, I'm not quite clear on that. Let me get back to you. Because your words have value. So don't just give them away willy-nilly, you know, think about it, because you'll walk away and thinking, why on earth did I say that? That's not even what I was thinking or feeling. So give yourself that grace to be able to just like take a moment and move with it. And then just like the last thing I would say on that is just that it goes back to one of our previous points, which is like relationships is everything. And so I never want someone to walk away from a human to human experience and interaction with me and feel horrible. It is something I am so conscious of in every single thing I do, whether that is walking onto the set and talking to the crew and saying hello to them and thanking them for their time and energy, all the way through to the director. You know, it doesn't matter who it is, I'm treating you exactly the same. And I think that we lose sight of that sometimes in this like dog eat dog world, and, you know, oh, we need to get on top of each other, we need to beat each other, comparisons and stuff. And I'm like, when it comes down to it, when I'm 90 years old, what am I going to remember? I'm going to remember the beautiful people and the beautiful experiences that I had with people, the memories, the good times. And that's what I want to leave with people. I never want someone to walk away from me thinking, oh God, she's a bit, you know? And I think that with that being said, you want to leave a good impression and a good feeling with them, but in protecting yourself at the same time.
Yeah, I think that can be challenging when you come across personalities or people that do have that dog eat dog world attitude and they're like coming at you, right? And again, like there's this thing called projection, which means it may not even have anything to do with you. You might just be in the firing line that day. But I think this is when the power of finding your own voice is so important because you will come across different kinds of tornadoes, I call them, in life. And really at the end of the day, like you don't need to match their energy because if you're aligned and like centered in your own voice, in your own energy, you just respond from a way that's authentic to you. But that again takes time and your voice is an evolving thing. People's voices around you are an evolving thing and you grow and change. So just like constantly doing that, and some of the beautiful tips you've shared so far, I think are really useful for people to just check in with themselves. It's all about that regular check-in,
100%.
Creating space for that regularly. Like I do that through spending time on my own, which is something I've learned over the last few years, or meditation, or, you know, I live in my head a lot. I like to journal, like kind of notes on my phone. People have different outlets. Do you kind of have something that...
Yeah, I live in my notes app and a lot of photo albums. So, you know, even when I'm feeling kind of like low in self-confidence, or I'm kind of having my doubts of who I am, why am I here, what am I doing? You know, we all have those days.
Crises.
100%. And it happens regularly. I have a photo album called My Wins. And I take photos from tiny little things to, oh, I actually made dinner this week, all the way through to hosting one of the biggest events of the year. It ranges, but what I like to do is that is my reminder album. I just skim through those photos and I'm like, you did that. You did that. No one else did it. You did it. Beautiful. And it's just a tiny little reminder to me that, hang on a second. Yes, you're thinking way in the future of like, I'm not where I want to be. It's 2024. I should have X amount. I should be doing this. I should be hosting this many things. No, let's look back and see how far you've come. And these kind of little, just this one technique I share with my community is creating a My Wins album. And that's all it takes. If you're not I'm very much a visual person. So looking back at the photos and videos totally shift my perspective. Sometimes it's just on your notes. Sometimes it's just listing out my January wins and then saying, this is what I did this month. And I'm really bloody proud of myself for that. So recognizing that. And what we were talking about earlier was kind of like loud confidence versus soft confidence. You know, you're speaking about your sisters and how they're quite fiery. That's loud confidence. But then there's others of us that would consider ourselves introverts that have that soft confidence. We don't come across the loudest in the room. You know, we're not the most attention-seeking individuals. But in my opinion, I am the most confident when I'm in my introvert mode. Like I call myself a bit of an extrovert introvert because I am both, and different scenarios and situations bring different versions of me out. But I think what is a misconception is the loudest person in the room is the most confident.
Oh yeah.
Right? Absolutely not. If anything, when I'm in a social setting and someone is super loud, I have so much compassion for them because I'm like, there is something a lot deeper there that you think looks like, oh my God, wow, I want to be them. No, there's always something there. You know, I kind of like feel a bit for them because I'm like, there's a reason they're seeking the validation, the attention. And I think that we need to recognize that as individuals. We don't have to be the loudest in the room to be the most confident at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of circle back to your album of wins. I'm glad you brought up for the less visual people because I think I'm more like written word style. I have an Excel sheet, which is very corporate of me. Wow. But it's just because it's kind of tied in with a couple other things I'm tracking, so to speak. But I have like a wins list. And so whenever something happens, big or small, doesn't matter, I'll put it on the list. And again, it's something I can go back and reflect on. And the best part about doing this, whether you pick a photo album, whether it's in your notes, whether it's on an Excel sheet, is once you know you are filling something out, you have something to add to, you start looking for those things. It's not like, oh, it's the end of January, what did I achieve? I need to write something out. If you know that's coming up, it helps you, it kind of like activates something and you start looking for things to be grateful for or proud of yourself for because you've put it on your radar. And then it becomes the, you know, it doesn't matter how big something small is. You're like, oh, this can go on my list or this can go in my album. And that's a really beautiful practice to have.
And all that does is just build your confidence. It builds your, you know, just self-assurance that, hang on, I did all this, I can move forward. And just sit, if you are feeling low in self-confidence, sit with it as well. I never try to push myself through it. You know, if I'm feeling rubbish, which I was this week a lot, I was just kind of like, oh, you're this, you're that, you know, like really talking myself down. And then only when I sat with that, I gave myself 24 hours. I was like, sit with it, feel it all, because then you're going to feel great tomorrow and you'll feel grateful for the rise up. And, you know, I wouldn't say push yourself through it. I would just say move with it, move with all the emotions. And then the next day, just get back on it.
Absolutely. If I ever have a day, you know, it's generally once a month, I have a big crying day.
Yeah.
I always feel so good the next day.
Yeah.
It's like you just let something go, but just like emotions are all, they're all temporary.
Yeah.
You know, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
Just feel it, let it do its thing. And I think the more raw you can get with yourself, the bigger the bounce back almost. And it's just, that's the ebbs and flows. Like even when I talk about life balance, it's never trying to achieve this, you know, holistic middle level state where you're never dealing with things. You need the lows because it's a point of reference for the high moments. And
100%.
sometimes low moments are points of change or points of reflection, and everything serves its purpose. There's a beautiful harmony between these binary moments in life. And, you know, having, I worked with a therapist for a few years. She was a high performance coach, but we did a lot of like psychology, and she was amazing. One of the things she taught me was having a cookie jar, which is effectively your photo album of wins, or a guest a few weeks ago called it a book of wins. So have those things where you track and you look and you have that activation to be like, what am I going to be proud of myself for today, this week, this month?
Yeah.
But I think this is a beautiful place to leave our conversation. I really, really enjoyed our chat.
We could go on for hours.
Honestly, this will not be the last podcast. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
and I'm
you.
so looking forward to seeing what then this year and beyond brings for you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I've absolutely loved this conversation. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.